Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. My name is Nick Weston. I am completely ordinary in every way. Well, I guess you could call me a little short and skinny. My unspoken motto all my life has been, don't make waves. My life has been quiet, average and perfect for me. I didn't earn much, but I lived somehow. I had a good job, even if it didn't elicit rave jokes at parties. I've dated several women, had serious relationships with even fewer, and married one. Kelly became my wife, and it was only with her that I felt special. Don't get me wrong, I didn't have a philosophy. Live by yourself and let others live. Far from it. But even I admit that it's nice to win the championship, to earn a prize. That's how I reacted to marrying Kelly, and after our years together, she still makes me feel like a gold medalist in a relationship. Well, minus a few weeks. Now I have to clarify one thing because obviously I haven't done it yet, and that's why my life has taken such a turn. If I firmly believe that I shouldn't look for problems, it doesn't mean that I'm complacent. At least that's what I thought. Others obviously thought I was accommodating. Why did everyone think differently from me? Yes, I'm not exactly impressive, but still. To tell you the truth, I've never had to bring a case to a fight in my entire life. I just did everything I could to live without creating problems, and no one ever saw the need to attack me. But I told myself that I would not bend over and endure if I was ever attacked. The special snake that got into my garden was another employee of my company, Jack Knowles. While I was working in climate control, he worked in the receiving and delivery department. He was everything that I wasn't. Tall, well-built, gruffly handsome, I think, and completely self-absorbed. From what little I've learned over the years of our work at the same place, he used to play sports in college or something like that. Those days are over, but he worked to maintain his physique as well as his demeanor. According to Jack, his nickname in the previous team was the Mountain. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you are the only one who does not believe in someone's nonsense? It's like you're wearing glasses from the movie Strangers Among Us. Only these ones recognize jerks. In our company, everyone, men and women, seem to be listening to Jack's every word. People laugh at his dumb jokes. Guys gather around to egg him on when he brags about his exploits without hiding too much. He shamelessly flirted with all the attractive women in the office, regardless of whether they were married or not. In addition, he could leave on a whim for long lunches and finish work earlier, without fear of reprisals from the leadership. Well, you got the idea. In general, all this time I was asking myself how each of these usually intelligent people could fall under his spell. God, some guys even called him the Mountain sometimes. Of course, such things were annoying, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm fixated on this. It's just an observation. I held myself together, did my job, and returned home to Kelly. Jack and I never crossed paths at work, so I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to make waves, after all. So I don't understand why Jack decided to pay attention to me. Maybe he realized that he wasn't making the right impression on me. Maybe I'm right for the classic relationship between a bully and his victim. But he's targeting me. It all started small, with little things like when guys just egg each other on, insults about my height and size. There were rare occasions when I needed to go down to the loading dock to get documentation, and he would ask if I needed him to get it for me from the tabletop or something like that. His entourage was laughing, and I was giggling, playing along with him and making it clear that I was not paying attention to it. For some reason, Jack Knowles decided that Nick Weston was his new source of entertainment at work. It wasn't long before I became Nicky's baby. Yes, this nickname was applied to me from time to time in my youth. It doesn't matter. But now I was treated this way at work, where adult professionals gathered, sometimes in the presence of my superiors. I could practically feel the contempt for me growing in my office, and it was as if I subconsciously knew that, judging by what everyone thought of me, I had already seen my last promotion in the company. It doesn't bother me. The guy is just having fun. It's not a big deal. Don't make trouble. You're imagining things. Looking back, I realized that my usual tactics actually worked against me, but it was a lifelong trait that could not be overcome at once. Besides, I figured if I ran into him, he'd laugh and slap me on the shoulder, saying he was just joking. If I had been outraged enough to file a complaint, I don't think anything would have happened to the golden boy. Most likely, I would have ended up losing my position when my colleagues turned on me for creating some difficulties. Knowles doesn't mean any harm. He just cheers everyone up. Don't forget, no matter if I was mistaken or not, I still didn't believe that I was a weakling. I was convinced that the threshold beyond which I should start acting had not yet been crossed. Perhaps looking back, I myself was partly responsible for the events that were about to happen, creating the conditions in which the seeds were able to take root. All this had been going on for several months when Jack decided to escalate the situation. A package of important papers was brought to me from another office. Jack noticed my name on the package as he passed the mail card and decided to deliver it himself. "Don't yawn, Nicky. Special delivery." That was the only warning before the bulging manila envelope crashed onto my desk. Spinning, he fell to the floor, knocking down a folding double photo frame. There were 2 photos in it. My wedding photo with Kelly and her posing on the beach in a bikini from our last vacation. Since I was at my desk and Jack threw the bag halfway to him, he picked up the fallen photo frame much faster. "Hey, Nicky, I'm sorry," Jack said with a malicious grin on his face in a tone insincere and condescending. When he straightened up with the photos in his hand, I made the most aggressive gesture towards him that I had ever made up to that moment, trying to snatch them from him. Jack dodged easily and turned them around to look. He looked my wife up and down with an approving grin. "Not bad, Nicky boy. I can't imagine how you managed to hold her." Since it was just the 2 of us this time, I sensed much less levity and more sincere contempt in his tone. Similarly, I did not force myself to smile. After staring at someone else's wife for too long, he casually dropped the double frame on the package and turned to the door. "Send this filly to me so that I can ride her a little. A wild one like her will throw you off sooner or later." "Damn, I'd do you a favor." He spat dispassionately over his shoulder. As it seemed to me, for the first time, something inside me began to tense up. After that, however, nothing special happened. In fact, the relationship between Jack and me was as quiet as it was before it all started. Too quiet, I should have thought. But I was pleased that I had eased the tension and believed that my personal philosophy had weathered this storm and I could set sail again. Soon after, the company's annual summer picnic took place. I had just pulled into the parking lot and was looking at Kelly, who was checking her hair and makeup one last time in the visor mirror. It was one of those little moments when you fall in love with a person all over again. I was sitting and thanking the Almighty, looking at my wife's vision, when she noticed that I was looking at her dreamily. "What are you thinking about, huh? Should I even know?" "What is it?" she asked. "I just thought it was time for us to take another vacation." "Oh, really? Is that all?" "Yeah," I replied, perhaps thinking deep down about that day in my office. "Somewhere warm and sunny with a beach. Maybe we'll buy you a new bikini, or maybe we'll even go somewhere where you won't need it." "Ha ha, would you like to?" She patted my hand playfully. "Come on." With that, she got out of the car and I followed her. My good mood was short-lived. Jack, the Mountain Knowles, was fashionably late, but that didn't stop him from gathering a crowd around him. There was always a group of men around him, laughing at any nonsense he uttered. I was good at keeping Kelly and me at a comfortable distance while we were eating kebabs and chatting. However, I noticed that my wife glances at a bunch of people from time to time, and she's obviously curious about what's going on there. My luck was about to run out. Jack, of course, settled down next to the drinks, and at some point we had to restock. I did my best to grab our drinks by literally going back and forth, noting Kelly's definite reluctance to leave the drinks area, and almost breathed freely when he noticed me. "Hey, Nicky boy, does your mom know that you're secretly drinking beer?" he shouted, stopping us on the way. Immediately, there was a burst of laughter from our colleagues who were around us, as well as guests who did not know any of us until today. I mean, come on, it wasn't even a good joke. "Come on," he said, approaching us so that our size difference became obvious. "I'm going to have to look at some kind of ID before I let you take this." There was another fit of laughter, but I barely noticed it. The reason was that this time there was another one added to the laughter. My wife's laughter. The crystal, angelic sound that I practically lived for now sounded as harsh as a beginner musician trying to play the clarinet. I couldn't help but glance at her. I wasn't the only one who caught that sound. And although I'm sure that up to this point he had been looking at the modest neckline of her summer dress more than I had, Jack expertly pretended to notice Kelly for the first time. "Well, hello. I know you. You're that beautiful woman with great taste in swimwear." He flashed her a crooked grin. "Excuse me?" she replied. Her tone betrayed her surprise at his audacity, but there was suspiciously no anger in it. In fact, there was a hint of a smile on her lips. My heart ached. Yes, Nikki likes to brag about you in front of guys. Shows everyone a photo of your amazing figure. I must say that the photo does not flatter you. What, really? There was anger in her voice now, but it wasn't directed at Jack. Her annoyance at his harmless little lie was nothing compared to the storm that was raging inside me right now. I admit, I was more than annoyed that she seemed to immediately believe in the lies of a man she had never met, especially since it was 180 degrees at odds with what I was doing. Indeed, all the people here knew that if they hadn't personally sat at my table, they hadn't seen this photo. But not a single soul told him that he was talking nonsense, and if I started denying it, it would look fake, whiny, and selfish. I was trapped. But the main focus of my rage was still Jack Knowles. My face was instantly flushed with rage and humiliation, so that it seemed as if I had been burned after 6 hours in the sun. This donkey couldn't count all his fingers and toes without a calculator, but he easily manipulated everyone around him, including my wife and, consequently, myself. I was still wearing those glasses. Why does no one but me see him the way he is? His eyes were fixed on her now. He was staring at Kelly and not unnoticed. His body language said I wasn't there, but his words were meant for both of us. I'd like to take you out sometime. That's if you can ever get rid of babysitting duties. There was laughter again, albeit more awkward and disjointed. After all, my colleagues had at least some decency. My wife, for her part, covered her mouth in shock, but her cheeks were grinning and her eyes were shining. I saw it. Damn women. They never miss an opportunity to convince you of their superior perception and that they know men by heart. But this apparent wealth of understanding seems to let them down when they need it most. The grief had to be dressed like a used car salesman. He was so fake. At that moment, I thought I had no chance. I definitely didn't have any support, especially where it should have been the most. Suddenly losing the desire to drink, eat, or celebrate, I refused beer and went out. Starting to move, I took Kelly's hand in mine. For the briefest of moments, she resisted the force pulling her before some part of her brain kicked in and she followed me. Maybe she just didn't expect to leave suddenly, but I took her resistance as another mini betrayal and threw her hand away like a hot potato, even before her legs started moving. I moved with determined but unhurried steps, vaguely aware of Kelly making typical excuses to the audience before following me. Jack did not fail to call out, "Hey, come on, Nikki. I was just joking. Don't be a bugger. God knows I would never want to cross your path." This caused even more laughter, including Kelly's, the beginning of which I heard before she stopped. She just couldn't help herself. For a moment it occurred to me that for once in his life, Jack might wonder if he had gone too far. But no, it required self-criticism, which he did not possess. Even if by some miracle he did, his pride would demand that he stay true to himself in order to save face. I walked some distance away and sat down on a picnic bench, staring into space. Kelly stood right behind me, watching the drama play out on my face. I could feel several emotions bubbling up in her, taking turns dominating her thoughts. Indignation, towards me. Embarrassment, not for me, but because of me. Confusion, what exactly should she tell me? Even perhaps disappointment, disapproval, disrespect. How did he set me up so quickly and thoroughly in front of my own wife? And how did she not pay attention to it? Finally, she spoke. Was this demonstration really necessary? I looked at her incredulously. I mean, your friend put you in an awkward position. And yes, he was rude. But I was just kidding. It was obvious. He probably does that a lot. I got up slowly and looked at her face. Mine? A friend? Well, it doesn't matter. I don't know. She decided to change her tactics. Hey, if you don't want guys to flirt with your wife, maybe you shouldn't show the product to your colleagues. I could only tilt my head slightly with my eyes closed and shake it several times in frustration. Kelly completely misunderstood my body language. Look, why don't we go and figure this out? I am sure that we can all come together, exchange apologies, and understand that this was a simple misunderstanding. She said this, pointing over her shoulder back to where we came from. I thought for a moment before answering, "No thanks. I understood everything perfectly and my day is ruined anyway." I turned around and headed for the car. When I reached it, I realized that I had made this journey alone. I looked back and saw her in the distance at the drinks table. I thought for a while, risking biting off my tongue as my vision blurred red, then got into the car and started it to turn on the air conditioner. I sat for a while, studying the details of the manufacturer's logo on the steering wheel, while the interior cooled down, even if my anger did not cool down. In the end, I told myself, fuck it all, and put it in reverse gear. I hadn't even started moving when I heard a knock on the passenger window. Kelly was standing there, gesturing at me. What the hell? I put the car back in the parking lot, the doors unlocked, and my wife climbed in a fit of irritation. What's your problem? I only came over to offer our apologies, and Mr. Knowles was kind enough to apologize too, she said. Apologize? For what? This guy is a world-class asshole. There was a lot going on today, but when it comes to him, there was nothing atypical. Wait a minute. Mr. Knowles? Kelly was taken aback for a moment because I never say that. It should have been a wake-up call for her, but she brushed it off because the 5 minutes she spent with him told her something else. Then she blushed briefly at the name of her new acquaintance. But then, in a subconscious attempt to stay on top, she felt anger again. Great. I was trying to do the right thing, but you decided to attack me. I can't believe you're acting like this. I never thought that you would be such a child. I'm really going to have to babysit you, aren't I? I have no idea what was reflected on my face, but whatever it was, it knocked the wind out of her sails. She turned away but did not apologize, apparently believing that I should apologize. The ride home was in silence. Of course, I was lost in thought and decided that she was too. But the only time I dared to look in her direction, I saw a faint reflection of her face in the window. It was faded, but there was a smile on her face. Have you been dreaming? We didn't say a word to each other that night, and after that everything was cool between us. There were the usual conversations together, small talk, discussion of everyday things, not the slightest hint of intimacy. I thought grimly about how quickly what we had with her had evaporated. After that fateful picnic, the lousy mood calmed down, but it never went away. As much as I didn't deserve Jack Knowles to come into my life, I also didn't deserve my life partner to take his side. The next working day after the picnic, Jack tried to publicly accept my apologies, which I never brought. I barely caught the thinly veiled mockery, but now for a different reason. I was no longer loose. I encased myself in stone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going with the flow. Now there was resentment in me. His comment was just thrown into the general pile. You could say that I had a kind of crisis of faith. For the first time in my life, my lifelong defense mechanism failed me. It was difficult for me to deal with it, which is understandable. The more I thought about my wife, the worse the taste in my mouth got. It's supposed to take a few days for a man to come to his senses and apologize, but I had nothing to apologize for, and it wasn't possible to earn Kelly's forgiveness. In fact, even getting an apology from her wasn't interesting. I realized that I didn't care. I began to analyze her every action from a new perspective. Has she always had these little bad habits? Did I just not notice them? Did I suppress minor irritations out of love? Admittedly, there were minor annoyances among the new questions, something that I undoubtedly knew before, but now I have felt. I realized that her taste in music really sucked. I was thinking that her car was a pigsty. There must have been at least 10 empty disposable coffee cups in her passenger seat. Why do I feel like I've only discovered all this now? And why does it bother me so suddenly? However, all this was just a reaction to how she felt about me. I'm willing to bet money that she thought she was hiding it well, but now I was watching her. For the first time, to be honest. I noticed the faintest thing, tiny grimaces at the sight of my habits, which she discovered she didn't like. I felt her contempt for me, even pity. Damn, apologizing for not doing anything wrong is probably going to make things worse. We fell out of love without even fighting. Strangely, I wasn't even sure if it bothered me that much. That thought tormented me more than the thought of losing her. Before all this, I would have sworn that Kelly was out of my league, and I would never have anyone better than her again. Now I was looking at this beautiful woman, and the only thing that came to my mind was betrayal. Weeks passed, and there was a lull at the front again. I didn't hear a sound from Jack at work, but I noticed his wolfish grin when he thought I couldn't see. My newfound attention was also focused on work. No one talked to me in the office unless it was about work. I could feel their discomfort next to me. I could feel their pitying looks. I was starting to hate them all. My boss put difficult tasks on me and thought he was doing it subtly enough so that I wouldn't notice. I thought that all these were rumors received after my humiliation at the picnic, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. There was a lot more to the looks that were cast at me, as I soon found out. The final death of my former life occurred in the men's room of the main lobby of my company. I didn't usually use this place, but I became so withdrawn, resentful, and embittered at everything. I was thinking about how all this was eating me up from the inside, looking at the cooked lunch on my table. To hell with it, I thought. I need to pamper myself. I haven't done this in a very long time. I decided that if Jack could indulge in long lunches, then so could I. I threw my lunch in the trash and headed for the main entrance, thinking that there is an upscale steakhouse in the city center. On the way, I wanted to take a leak, so I went to the toilet. Although I just needed to pee, the mood was such that I went into the last booth. I had just finished and was about to reach out to flush when two guys came up to the urinals. They weren't exactly quiet, but they obviously thought they were alone. I recognized them by their voices, but I didn't know which one was which. Mike and Gavin. Both worked with Knowles at the loading dock and were a pair of footmen. Seriously, we never grow up, do we? "Hey, do you really want wings? We have time to go get a steak," said the guy whose name I think was Gavin. Damn if they didn't have the same idea as me. "Only after the salary. My wife will skin me alive," Mike apparently replied. Gavin laughed shortly. Mike felt the need to clarify this statement. "Hey, we can't all be Jacks. No shit like that. I still can't believe he's sleeping with Nikki's wife. What did he say?" "Do you really think so? Is that arrogance even for him?" "Oh yes, he is," Gavin said. "Ever since, right after the barbecue, he practically picked her up there. He told me he'd have her pinned down by next week. They meet for lunch. He's probably sleeping with her in the dude's bed at the very moment when you and I are talking." "Do you think little Nikki knows?" Mike asked. "Who knows, dude? And who cares?" "Dude, maybe I'll mess around." "Yes, please." They laughed, flushed. At least the bastards washed their hands, although that meant I had to stand awkwardly in the last stall for another 30 seconds. They never noticed me. Well, how was that? I know it's weird for my first thought. It was at this point that I learned that you can be shocked without being surprised. Unlike the guy who was here a minute ago, I didn't have the slightest doubt that what I heard was true. It made so many pieces fall into place in my mind. But that doesn't mean that what I heard out loud didn't hit like a ton of bricks. The looks my colleagues were giving me made even more sense now. I finished my business on autopilot, not even paying attention to my reflection in the mirror when I washed my face. The only thought in my head was that I no longer had an appetite, and when my car pulled out of the parking lot, I wasn't going to drive downtown. If I had had any doubts before I drove up to the house, they would have been dispelled when I saw Kelly's car parked at the entrance, and an SUV that I could assume belonged to Knowles. Hell, they're not even trying to hide it. The neighbors are as well aware of what is happening as my colleagues, I thought dejectedly. It's still strange for me to remember it. I should have felt heartbroken in all this. Maybe it was, but the blue color of the heartache was completely washed away by the red anger of betrayal. My anger was a red-hot coal in the pit of my stomach. As I approached the front door, it occurred to me that I wasn't the least bit afraid of Jack the Mountain. At that moment, all my cognitive abilities were occupied with retribution. I have already heard the expression red veil. Now I knew exactly what it meant. It was as if a red light filter was put on my vision out of hatred. They could be heard through the door, but as soon as I opened it, the sound of stormy love became unmistakable. There was a short walk on the carpet to visually confirm the reality of my marriage. They were both completely naked, so they decided to take their time. From my position at the door and given the position of our bed, I was mostly behind them, but at a sufficient angle to see their silhouettes. I doubt she would have noticed me even if I was right in front of her. I've seen enough. He turned and retreated to the wall next to the doorway, out of sight. Not that I needed to be particularly secretive. I was still furious, but strangely enough, when I saw them with my own eyes, I sank to the ground a little. I wasn't going to attack. I needed to weigh my options. Somewhere from the depths of my psyche, my former self surfaced again. Wait a minute. Nothing good will come of it. You can't do anything without making the situation worse. Just come back and have lunch. Pretend you didn't see anything. But just as quickly, as soon as the new I was stamped, the old I retreated. To hell with it. You've stayed away from this all your life. Look at what it's led to. I started thinking. I looked into the bedroom for a second. My gaze landed on the back of Jack's head. No doubt I was furious with my wife. Kelly made the decision to cheat on me, but he's been pushing for it ever since he saw her picture. He decided that I could be fucked. This had to be answered in such a way that he cursed his arrogance on his dying day. No matter how furious I wasn't an idiot. If I challenged him, he would put me in a coma, and my sweetheart would probably laugh and crack nuts watching what was happening. Then she would have told the cops that I was the one who attacked him. Even if I had hit him, I would have felt sick quickly. Maybe if I had a gun, a baseball bat, or maybe I have a crowbar in my garage. A good slap on the head might help, but it was possible that he would recover quickly. How hard can I hit? It's not for nothing that he was nicknamed the Mountain. Maybe I can hit him in the head, but what if I kill you? I'd be lying if I said that at that moment I wasn't thinking about killing, and I don't care about the consequences. But I knew I didn't want Jack Knowles to die that day. I wanted him to regret his decision for a long time. At that moment, I saw the light. It wasn't just me. It's about him. Jack Knowles had a large balance on his karmic credit card. He lived a good life. But today is the day of reckoning, and today he will face the consequences and regret it. Now I felt that my revenge was not only justified, but that I was an instrument of justice. I had to balance the cosmic scales on Jack, so what could I do? I was outnumbered. And what to do when you are physically superior? Then you need to outwit your sworn enemy. It's good. He's the kind of guy who can always find a job as a fence post if the pickup and delivery don't pay off. But what good does it do me? He sleeps with my wife. What am I supposed to do? Should I come and ask him a math problem? No. I couldn't fight him, and my wits wouldn't be useful right now. No, to do that, I had to drive my enemy to madness. I've been maneuvering my whole life. My wife and Jack took advantage of this to make love behind my back. It's time for a sharp turnaround. You might be surprised how long I've been thinking about this under the noise made by the man I hated the most in the world. In truth, my neurons were working so fast that these myriad thoughts raced through my head in nanoseconds. It takes more time to read, much less write this thought than it takes to think about it. I went downstairs quietly. Not that I needed to be very quiet, but I wanted to ensure that they wouldn't notice. I sneaked into the garage. In the closet above the small built-in workbench, I pulled out my trusty, almost full can of WD-40. Then he went back inside, walked over to the decorative fireplace where Kelly kept her scented candles, and picked up the lighter she kept there. After finishing my preparations, I crept back into the bedroom. When I crept up behind him, Lady Luck was finally on my side. I noticed that Jack had the look of a natural macho man. He was a pretty hairy guy and obviously didn't believe in any self-care. It was only better for me. As I was about to aim, his grunts got louder and more frantic. Perfect. I chuckled. There is a God, and he puts my enemy in my hands. Not only was I going to ruin Mr. Knowles' day, and in fact, his whole life. Although Jack probably thought that one day I might catch them, maybe even looked forward to it, he didn't even seem to allow the thought that I would defeat him. I can imagine how he imagined that I would cry or scream from shock. Maybe I'll jump on him and give him the opportunity to beat the shit out of me, and continue using my wife on top of my unconscious body. What the hell? That's all he could say, spinning in place too late to prevent his hairy back from being covered with oil, while continuing to remain the same hairy in front. He reflexively closed his eyes when a fine mist fell on his face, which worked, but not before he saw me. Damn bonus, he doesn't even take care of his pubis. I hoped that at that moment he had the presence of mind to understand what was going to happen to him now. Maybe there was even enough time not to take it seriously. After all, no one can be that crazy, right? I clicked the lighter's wheel and held it up to the spray cone. The effect was so unexpected that it even slightly surprised me. The mist turned from a reliable lubricant into a jet of flame. A second later, the mountain could have changed its nickname to Human Torch. A second after that, the screams started. I have no idea if Jack was an experienced boxer, but it was easy to dodge a wild swing. Admittedly, his first priority was probably to knock the jar out of my hand. After that, he took a couple of awkward steps towards me, waving both arms. Only his size worked against him, as I dodged his punch. Now we switched places in the bedroom, and I resumed the massacre. I quickly noticed Kelly, mainly to make sure she wasn't interfering. She climbed onto the edge of the bed and curled up into a ball, her eyes wide with shock and horror. The primitive instinct of lust in her immediately faded away when it was replaced by an even more primitive instinct, to get away from the fire. I couldn't help but think that some kind of illusion in her mind about how hypothetically this confrontation could develop was crumbling as a new reality came into its own. and it was difficult for her to accept what she was seeing. Jack was in a panic. He was moving aimlessly towards our dresser, shouting incoherently and waving his arms. I had a fleeting thought that the room might catch fire, but there was nothing flammable in the immediate vicinity of him as long as he continued to move. I also didn't care. It was funny to watch the flaming figure lose his composure. Obviously, I wasn't thinking straight. I just found my wife in bed with another man. But he really couldn't think clearly. After all, he was on fucking fire. At that moment, a thought struck me. If it was a movie or something like that, then the main character would have a witty phrase ready. For the first time since it all started, I felt the need to say something. "Hey, Jackie, light up, motherfucker!" Okay, I wish I could have come up with something better, but it was in the moment. The main thing is that I wanted my words to be burned into his memory forever. Hey, burned out. Finally, some part of his gray matter worked, and he fell to the floor and began to roll. This is important safety advice. If you ever catch fire, stop, fall, and roll over. However, it should be noted that stop, fall, and roll will not work if you are deliberately set on fire by the man you deceived, and this man stands right above you and continues to pour fire on you. Right after that, I finally stopped because I noticed that the carpet was on fire. That would have stopped his skating, but not if I had continued to give him a premature Viking funeral. The flames gave way to smoke, and the air was filled with an acrid smell. His agonized screams subsided, turning into pitiful moans of agony. I realized that someone was laughing maniacally, and then I realized that it was me, and he stopped. Standing there, I wasn't angry anymore. I felt neither rage nor pain from betrayal. All I felt at that moment was elation, the triumph of victory over the enemy. At that moment, I understood the caveman when he smashed the skull of his rival from a nearby cave, or the Ronin samurai when he felt his blade plunge into the monster who killed his sensei. I took a quick look around my bedroom, confident that there would be no fire in the house. Then he took one last look at Kelly. She paled under my gaze, afraid that she was next, but I wasn't going to hurt her. When I turned to leave, it seemed to me that there was a flicker of remorse in her eyes, as if the scales of the last few weeks had fallen off her. Well, it's too late now. As I was walking to the front door, the smoke alarm went off. I stood on the steps and casually threw the WD-40 and lighter into the yard before sitting down. A whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swept over me in front of the door. I admit, I felt fear and uncertainty about my future, but I didn't have a drop of regret. I took out my phone and for some reason pressed the F key. I almost never use it, and I'm not the type to be inundated with friends and notifications. The only reason was that I knew that this would become known, and I felt the need to speak out. I switched the status of the message from friends only to public and started typing. When people find out about what just happened, I want them to know that I won't make excuses. Suffice it to say that the guy in question thought that way. He considered himself a hot shit. It turned out that he was right. That's all. I clicked share and dropped the phone on the jar. I sat and waited. It was a good day. It seemed too long before I heard sirens in the distance. How long did it take my wife to recover after her lover came out of the oven? It turned out that in the near future I had to sit and wait a lot. I did not offer any resistance to the police and did not utter any words other than brief confirmations that I was obeying while I was detained and processed. I was silent during the interrogation. I knew I didn't have to talk, and I didn't see the point. There was no doubt about what had happened. I didn't make any attempts to find a lawyer, so imagine my surprise when one of them appeared in the interrogation room a few days later. I explained to the guy whose suit looked like it cost more than my car that I hadn't asked for a lawyer, and even if I had, I couldn't afford one. Kelly had probably already emptied our bank account, and I knew I was facing a civil lawsuit. Then he informed me that I would not have to pay. His firm is offering its services in exchange for its part of the lawsuit that I had to file. What? Am I filing a lawsuit? That's the news. Of course, the incident in my house would have been known, at least at my job, but I underestimated how sensational it would be. Add to that my silent but vague Facebook statement, and it went viral. I got my 15 minutes of fame sitting in a prison cell, cut off from the whole world and unaware of anything. Everyone at my job seemed to love Jack Knowles, but as it turned out, not as much as they loved juicy gossip. The rumors spread like fire through Jack's body. This led to the arrival of several reporters, not from the Times or anything like that, but the locals followed the juicy story. Undoubtedly excited by the attention, the people who kissed Knowles' ass now threw him under the bus. To be honest, they probably presented everything in a worse light than I actually experienced. But I didn't care. Before the company could do anything, there were high-profile stories of a hostile work environment that contributed to an atmosphere of harassment and insults. The public perceived me as a long-suffering victim, and the company, they say, approved of all this, and it was only a matter of time before I snapped. My lawyer and his firm were not altruistic. They were sharks that smelled blood. To tell the truth, I wouldn't have a real case. But this guy was a professional. He had a big firm behind him, and my company was waist-deep in bad publicity. The lawyer was sure that an agreement worthy of his time was possible, to conclude without any problems. In exchange for my cooperation, they will handle my lawsuit as well as my case. I thought it was pretty simple. It was probably the easiest case the police had ever had. However, my new lawyer friend gave me reasonable guarantees that he has the ability to significantly mitigate my landing. I had a clean record and a very sympathetic, very public set of mitigating circumstances. The only thing I asked him to do in return was to assign someone to handle my divorce, just to get rid of him. I was on my way to prison, and fighting for something seemed pointless. He asked if I wanted to prepare a divorce file. It took me by surprise. It's been 2 weeks now. I didn't think about bail. I just assumed that Kelly had already filed for divorce and was waiting for the paperwork to arrive any day now. But the lawyer said that, as far as he knew, she had not done so. Strange. As a result, I was sentenced to 7 years with the possibility of parole in 5. I have no idea what the final amount of the settlement agreement with my now former employer was. The law firm that took over my case probably didn't want me to know how big their lion's share was. I can't retire with my share, but I'll have a fresh start when I breathe the air of freedom again. Yes, I was a little annoyed when Jack sued me, but I was far from rich. He couldn't buy yachts with my money. There probably won't be enough money in the world to fix how ugly he has become. He'll burn everything he gets from me in a month. Besides, I was a prisoner. I couldn't do anything with my money anyway, as the settlement was in another pool that was closed. So Kelly took the hit. He wasn't such a stud anymore, was he? No, she destroyed her marriage and her lifestyle for the sake of someone who was now, in fact, a very expensive gigolo. This was another reason why it seemed strange to me that she never filed for divorce, although since we were married anyway at the time of the incident, I don't think she would have been able to protect her assets from him in this way. It doesn't matter. It was all behind big walls from me. As far as I know, I am divorced. I've been here for a year now. I have not seen or heard from her, nor have I tried to contact her. I guess I'll have to deal with her one day. But maybe not. 5 to 7 is a long time. I occupied my time with reading and weightlifting. There was nothing else to do. Besides, I couldn't set fire to people who would contradict me after I got out of prison. I'm never going to get big, but I was pretty damn sure I was going to make the most of what I have. Maybe I should get 1 or 2 prison tattoos. If Kelly ever sees me again, she'll be afraid of me. One last little twist, and I got an email from a random single woman. I've heard about these strange women who have pen pals with prisoners. This shit is real, and my story in particular has made me a target for ladies who wanted to soothe my broken heart one day. I have received more than one promise of eternal love and fidelity from women I have never seen. I wasn't going to believe anyone. It was too weird. But it amused me. So here's my story. I don't think anyone was happy except my lawyer, but I think I handled this shitty situation the best I could. I am calm for my life. My prison term is coming to an end. Jack's prison is his own pathetic hide, which he will be in for the rest of his life. The only thing left is that I still owe myself a steak.